Hello, everyone. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today for the webinar Leading Through a Pandemic, the Impact of COVID-19 on the Public Sector Workforce. Quickly, I wanted to go over a few logistics. If you have questions for any of our panelists, please put them in the Q&A or in the chat in the web platform. The session will be recorded, and the slides, a copy of the Employee Connection Survey report, and a link to the video from this webinar will be provided to all attendees after the webinar concludes. With that, I'd like to introduce Jerry Greenwell, CEO of CPS HR Consulting.
Thank you, Jason. Good afternoon to everybody that's not. So we're truly living through historic and unprecedented time. I think the last 6 months in particular have had an impact on all of our organizations. And I wanted to sincerely thank Bob and our team for making it a priority to understand just how much we in the public sector have been impacted, and more importantly, how we can lead through this pandemic and any other major crisis that occurs. As we have come to realize, the citizens are looking to the government to lead the way and continue to provide the essential services necessary to sustain their communities. Public sector agencies don't have the luxury of just waiting this out and hoping it will pass. We must be engaged. So we're excited today to bring you a wonderful lineup of panelists and truly hope that the information that we provide in this webinar will help you and your individual organization. So with that, I introduce Bob Lavigna.
Thanks, Jerry. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. As Jerry said, we've got folks who are logging in from all over the country and actually in Canada as well. So we're speaking to folks in about 7 different time zones. So thank you very much for participating with us today. And I want to build on some of Jerry's comments. I'm the Director of the Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement, by the way. I'll talk a little bit about who we are in a moment. But as we know, COVID-19 is affecting everyone, not just at work, but also at home. And we were just talking before we went live, the experience may seem surreal to us, but it's our new reality. And the virus has drastically affected our workplace. Even before COVID-19, many employees were working remotely at least part of the time. Now, millions more, actually tens of millions more, including in government, are working from home full time. This has created challenges not only with technology, but also around employees' well-being, performance, productivity, and employee engagement. So to better understand how public sector organizations and employees are handling this new work environment, CPS HR developed and administered a nationwide survey to ask employees how they are faring in this new COVID-19 work environment. We received almost 20,000 responses from government employees across the nation. We produced a report, Leading Through a Pandemic, the Impact of COVID-19 on the Public Sector, and each of you will be given access to a copy of the report. And today what we want to do is highlight some of the survey results, and then our panelists, and you see the names of our panelists, I'll introduce them when we have the panel discussion. We'll talk about their reactions in their individual jurisdictions to the survey responses. So we want to cover 3 things, share with you some pretty high-level results from the National COVID-19 Survey. We'll have the panel discussion, and of course, we'll give you the opportunity to ask our panelists some questions. A little bit about our organization, CPS HR Consulting. We're an independent, self-supporting government agency. Our focus is on excellence in the public sector. We are all public servants in CPS HR. So like the organizations and the people we work with across the country, we share a common experience. HR as a way to improve and maintain a high level of public sector performance. And we have about 1,200 clients across the country. Our headquarters is in Sacramento, but we have employees all over the country. I'm actually coming to you today from my home in Madison, Wisconsin. Several years ago, we created a new business unit, the Institute for Public Sector Employee Engagement, to focus more specifically on helping public sector organizations measure and improve employee engagement, and also conduct research as we have done with the Employee Connection Survey. Let's talk a little bit about the survey. 28 questions. We asked employees to self-identify whether they are essential, that is, still reporting to their work sites, or remote, that is working from home or another location. And based on that answer, they responded to somewhat different questions. We administered the survey last spring, primarily after most organizations had transitioned to a large proportion of their employees working remotely. I mentioned we had almost 20,000 responses, 87% local and 10% state government employees. This is an image of the report, the cover of the report. The report, of course, goes into much more detail than we will be able to discuss today in this brief webinar, but we'll give you some of the highlights, and then we'll also give you access to the report itself. So some highlights from the survey. As I mentioned, we asked employees to self-identify whether they are essential or remote, and more than half identified as essential. This is a little bit surprising to us, given the nationwide conversation focusing primarily on employees working remotely. And this kind of brought home to us the fact that in government, unlike some private sector organizations, most public sector organizations are not going to be able to go completely remote. We need to have our folks delivering essential services, whether it's law enforcement or fire or public works or human services, etc. So we're different in that respect than a lot of private sector organizations, and we'll return to that later on. We asked folks to tell us in 3 words how they are feeling right now. And this is the word cloud that we created based on those responses. So as you can see, anxious, tired, stressed, overwhelmed, worried, also good. So some people are feeling pretty good. But this, I think, reinforces what many of us are feeling about this new work environment. They asked the question, has your organization done a good job adapting to COVID-19? And 80% agreed with this statement. So really a high level of agreement that their organizations have done a good job responding to COVID-19. Do you understand your COVID-19 policies? Again, about 80% in agreement, so organizations seem to have done a pretty good job of communicating their new policies. We also asked folks to identify the 3 most effective communication approaches. And you can see email is by far the #1 identified communication approach, 77%. But it's also shown, and the numbers don't add to 100 because we asked folks to identify 3, also shows that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to communicating. While email is effective, there are other approaches that employees also identified as useful. So those are some of the high-level findings with regard to employees who identified themselves as working remotely. How about the essential employees continuing to report to their work sites? Did they expect to be essential? 70% said yes, but 30% of employees who identified as essential were either unsure or they didn't expect to be essential. And again, we'll return to that when we get to the recommendations. Do they have the equipment they need? 69% yes, but 31% either no or unsure. So it seems like the organizations where these folks work need to do a better job of equipping employees who are still at their work sites to maintain their health and safety. So remote employees, we talked about essential, we talked about the kind of high-level findings, talked about how essential employees responded. Now let's see how remote employees responded. How many of them worked remotely before COVID-19? Only 24%. And these are folks who self-identified, about 10,000 of them, as working remotely now. Only 24% of them worked remotely before COVID-19. Do they have the tools and technology they need? 88% yes. So clearly the organizations where these folks work are doing a pretty good job of giving their remote employees the tools and technology, communication technology, computer equipment, so forth, that they need. This is very interesting. We asked folks who are working remotely now, when they can return to work, what would they like to do? 57% said they'd like to work remotely part-time, 28% full-time. So 85% of the employees who are working remotely now want to continue to work remotely, at least part-time. And while some folks may see this trend towards remote work as a short-term response to the COVID-19 crisis, these results indicate that it's more than that. And we're not the only ones who are saying this. There's a lot of conversation in the literature about how this is the beginning of really creating a new workplace with a much higher percentage of folks working remotely, either part or full-time, who didn't work remotely before COVID-19. So we also did a comparison between remote and essential employees to try to determine the extent to which these two categories of employees feel the same or differently about their new work environment. How do you feel about your designation? Positive, negative, or neither? As you can see, employees who are working remotely, significantly higher percentage of employees who are positive about their situation, 21 percentage points higher than essential employees. Organizations have done a good job adapting to COVID-19 changes. Again, significantly higher proportion of employees who are working remotely feel that their organization has done a good job adapting to COVID-19. I understand our COVID-19 policies. Again, higher percentage of remote employees agreeing with this than essential employees. Recent communications have been helpful, and I'm not going to repeat myself. You can see the results here. Remote employees much more satisfied with their communications from leaders, managers, supervisors, and team members than essential employees. My workload, what has happened to my workload? 42% of essential employees' workload has increased compared to 35%. So a significant proportion of the 20,000 employees who responded to the survey say that their workload has increased, but a higher percentage among essential employees. So again, a very high-level description of the survey results. Overall, then we shared with you specific to remote employees, essential employees, and then a comparison between remote and essential employees. So what does it all mean? Recommendations that we included in the report. It's important to communicate in advance which employees are essential. 30% of the employees currently designated as essential did not know that they would be designated as essential in advance. They didn't have the opportunity to prepare, and perhaps the organization didn't have the opportunity to prepare. Provide employees with the support they need, not just at work, but to deal with the situation personally. That word cloud, stress, anxiety. We need to provide employees with wellness and mental health support, whether it's information about wellness, telecounseling. Some organizations are providing their employees, because it's really difficult for many employees to deal with this new work environment, including folks who are working at home and have to deal with a lot of interruptions. Monitor workloads, minimize burnout. Significant percentage of employees in both categories reported a higher level workload, but a significant percentage also said their workload has decreased. So we need to focus on minimizing burnout, but also making sure that all of our employees continue to be productive. I mentioned earlier, 85% of employees who are working remotely want to continue to do that. And we believe that this is really going to be a sea change in how we manage work and how we manage the workforce. And we need to enable those folks to be productive. We need to help our managers and supervisors with the tools and the understanding about how to manage results and outcomes, not just time and attendance. And a lot of our managers and supervisors are not comfortable managing employees who are working remotely. We need to take a look at our jobs and redesign them to adapt them to remote work, to adapt them to the world of technology. Give employees working remotely the flexibility to deal with their children, their pets. One of our participants today has just had a dog that had 9 puppies, and he has to deal with that situation. There's a quote where someone in a leadership position said, "We have to be flexible with our employees. We have to give them the opportunity to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for their kids during the day. So give employees or present employees with the expectation that we are going to give them the flexibility to manage their workload, but also manage their personal lives, and provide the tools and the resources that remote workers need. As I was speaking to someone last month who said that their employees in their organization had to literally lug their tabletop computers home because they were not prepared with laptops. A heavy lift, literally. We have to make sure that our folks permanently have the tools and resources and enable them to work remotely. Use a variety of communication approaches. We found that 77% of employees identified email as an important communication approach, but they also mentioned other ways to communicate, including video. Provide essential employees with the information and tools they need. Essential employees were much less satisfied with communication, with policies, and the way their organizations are dealing with COVID-19 than remote employees. And really, we have to guard against creating two classes of employees: folks who are able to work at home and folks who have to continue to come to their workplaces. Essential employees might consider remote employees to be the haves and the essential employees to be the have-nots. We have to make sure that we're taking care of all of our employees, regardless of where they're working. And one thing that I really think is positive, and many private sector companies are really focused on this, seeing the demand for remote work as an opportunity to grow the search and expand the search for talent without being limited to where employees work. And I know there may be some issues with local government, for example, with residency requirements, but we can certainly expand the pool of talent, including the search for ways to expand diversity on our workforces if we view remote work as an opportunity to go beyond where we typically go to recruit talent and ask employees for feedback, just as we did. I think in the indication that we had 20,000 responses shows that individual organizations should be asking their employees how they feel about the new workplace and how they feel about the way the organization is treating them and enabling them to be successful and balance their work and personal lives. So, very high level discussion of some of the results, much more in the report, and we'll give you access to that. I want to transition now to the panel discussion and ask our panelists to tell us a little bit about how their organizations have responded to the survey results. Each of these three organizations administered our Employee Connection Survey. So how they responded and what are they doing about the survey results. So I want to quickly introduce the panelists, tell you a little bit about who they are. They are listed here in alphabetical order. Angela Broadus is a human resource manager with the city of Fairfield, California, joined just before the start of COVID-19. Before that, she worked for the city of Vallejo, the county of Napa, and a few small startup companies. Her roles have included accounting, payroll processing, HRS analysis, and HR program management. Angela was born in Pennsylvania, but grew up overseas in Haiti, where she was inspired to pursue a career in government, supporting those who serve the community. She's an aunt to 4 adorable nieces and nephews, recently adopted an 11-year-old corgi named Stumpers, who is obsessed with squeaky toys and food. In her free time, Angela enjoys hiking, camping, concerts, and road trips. She has a BA in sociology with a minor in African and African American studies from the University of California at Davis. Our second panelist, Catherine Crusade, County of Monterey, California, has 15 years of public service experience, joined the county in December 2019, serving in the newly created position of Employee Engagement Manager. In the last several months, Catherine teamed up with HR and IT to implement creative ideas and lead projects to support leaders, serve the public, and engage the county's workforce during the pandemic and fires. Previously, she, while working for the County of Sacramento's Training and Organizational Development Division, was instrumental in developing and launching a countywide coaching program to enhance leadership competencies. Early in her career, Catherine served as a career management consultant with international HR consulting firm, Right Management Consultants. She's currently pursuing a master's degree in organizational leadership with Brandon Brandman University. And Michelle Shelton, City of Detroit. She oversees the day-to-day operations of the division, primarily responsible for the employee experience from onboarding to offboarding. She provides strategic direction for the professional and administrative staff in onboarding, employee relations, leave administration, talent retention, employee engagement, and unemployment. Her career and experience includes municipal government, job development, corporate and healthcare agencies. As Vice President of Leadership Development for Forum, Michigan, she oversaw the strategic direction, delivery, and sales of all leadership development programs by a nonprofit focused on the professional and personal development of women. She was also a talent management consultant leading diversity and leadership development programming at St. Joseph's Mercy Health System and organizational development consultant at Henry Ford Health System, leading the system-wide employee engagement initiative. She also owns and operates Shelton Consulting Group, which specializes in leadership development and team cohesion. Michelle has an MS in HR and a BS in Service Sector Administration, both from Central Michigan U. So what we're going to do is I will ask the panelists a couple of questions. Each of them will respond to each question, and then we'll see how the timing goes. But we want to give all of you enough time to also ask us some questions. So the first question is, what was your reaction to your organization's survey results? What were your biggest takeaways? And were there any surprises? So Michelle, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everyone. Happy to be here and discuss the information regarding the survey. Let me know if you're having any trouble hearing me. Regarding the survey for us, for the city of Detroit, getting the information, we were pleasantly surprised. I know I was, in terms of the participation. This had been the first survey of this type that had been conducted, if ever, for a very long time. And so there was the anticipation that we would have a low participation rate. But when we looked at the data, the information was much higher on the employees that weren't essential employees. We had actually broken out our data so that we could see participation for essential employees compared to those who, I would say, frontline employees, which would be police and fire, and then compared to those who, what we considered general city, it was pretty high. So that was the first thing that we really took away, is that the good thing that we had the participation that we did in the middle of a pandemic. We administered our survey sometime between the end of May and the beginning of June. So what we did take away was a lot of what Bob had shared in the presentation. A lot of that was synonymous with our experience. We were happy to get the feedback that our employees felt that we were adapting well to change. But we were also happy to hear that we were providing the right safety equipment, that we were providing the right information at the right time. Of course, we could do better. We were seeing scores in the high 70s around those questions. But for the most part, employees were seeing that we were responding and adapting to change very well. Some of the key takeaways is really about being prepared to administer a survey. Basically, you want to make sure that you have mechanisms for people to actually be able to respond. So making sure that we communicate about the survey and make it possible for people to respond to the survey were some key takeaways. And then having the right buy-in. We started from the top and really encouraged our department heads to encourage all employees to participate. And so we learned from that experience that we really needed more of a grassroots effort in getting the word out and getting people to want to contribute their voice to the survey. So those were the primary things that came to mind for me as the biggest takeaways. But overall, we were very happy with the responses and the feedback that we received. I will say one more thing about the word cloud. It was that we saw good was the biggest word. Anxious was a smaller word. It was still large in comparison, but good was the largest word that we saw in the word cloud, which made us feel good that we must have been doing something right, or at least the situation at home for employees was set up so that they could continue to be productive and feel like they were making an impact.
Thanks, Michelle. So some comments about both content and process. And I like the point that you made about communication, because as an organization at the Institute, where we do a lot of surveys, we have found that the high response rate is almost always driven by effective communication and sending the message out that this is really important and we're going to do something with the results. So thank you. How about you, Angela? But anything jump out at you? Any lessons? Any surprises?
Yeah. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Michelle's agency, it had been a while, if ever, since our HR department and our city had asked for feedback from employees. And so I think that helped drive a high response rate, was especially in uncertain times. People felt that, my voice can be heard. There's an opportunity for me to share my experience. So there was a large appreciation for the communication that we're sending out to employees. That always, makes you feel good. I was surprised, like you said, Michelle, with some of the more positive words that came out in the word cloud. I think that speaks to the resilience of our employees. I'd be curious what that word cloud would look like now. Our agency has been back for quite some time, several months now. And I'm wondering if maybe some of those positive feelings were more related to, okay, now we've gotten home and home feels safe. And maybe some of the more anxious type responses were still those from the employees deemed essential and working on site. I was also surprised by the high response rate from our public works department. I think they were our highest response. And typically that group of employees does not usually access their email or typically work on a computer from day to day. So that was great to hear from the department that normally is pretty quiet.
Thanks, Angela. And a point that I think both of you have made is, we're providing you with the results from a national survey of 20,000 employees. But in order to really understand what's going on in your workforce, you have to ask your employees. Like Michelle said, in her word cloud was different than the word cloud that we found across 20,000 employees. So it's instructive to understand what's going on nationally, but to really take action, you have to understand what's going on in your workforce. How about you, Catherine?
Hi, everybody. Bob, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today, and also acknowledge CPSHR for the opportunity to be part of the survey. So similar to what Michelle said, I was really pleased with the participation rate, and I really have to acknowledge our county leaders, specifically Charles McKee, our county administrative officer, who sent out emails on our behalf, inviting employees to be part of the survey. And I think it means a lot. It lends a lot of credibility to a survey when you have your top level leader encouraging employees to take part in it. And then with our participation rate, we actually, the county launched its first employee engagement survey in 2018, did another one in 2019, right before I joined the county. And so we actually saw an increase in participation rate. We had about a 61% participation rate with this particular survey. And we had a little time to really advertise it. So I was pretty pleased with that. The real takeaway for me was, and you touched on it, Bob, the remote work responses. We had about a little over 2,100 people respond to the survey. 700 of them were working remotely. 84% were working remotely for the first time. And similar to the national averages, the remote work responses from the County of Monterey fell in that 80% percentile range. And when you think about it, working from home during COVID-19 is not your business as usual telework situation. So with people having perhaps having a spouse or partner that's also working from home, or children or aging parents, I was really pleased that the remote work responses were as high as they were. And also, I want to share that I leveraged the responses in working with our department heads in reviewing their particular department or division responses around remote work. It was interesting, prior to COVID-19, I was discussing telework because that was one of the main themes that came out of our 2019 survey, that employees strongly had a strong interest in telework. And it's interesting that some of the department heads that weren't very receptive to it prior to COVID-19, as I'm talking to them now, they're on board. They have personally experienced telework. They're finding that it allows them to focus. They're finding that their teams are more productive. And that's even, I'm hearing that they're even connecting more to their team members through Zoom. And for example, a department head who was having monthly all staff meetings when COVID shelter in place took effect was having daily all staff meetings versus via Zoom. So that was one of my main takeaways.
That's great, Catherine, especially that last point that you made, because we're also hearing from other organizations. In fact, I was talking to an HR director last week who has been lobbying her leadership to provide some workplace flexibility, but her leaders were resisting until now, experiencing the same thing that you experienced, which is this can really work and there's a demand for it. I want to ask the audience, if you have questions, submit them through the chat box, and then once the panelists have answered a couple more questions, we'll start asking or answering your questions. So the second thing that I want to ask our panelists is, the real value in doing a survey is not just doing the survey, it's taking action and responding to the survey results. So I'm going to ask the panelists to talk a little bit about either what steps they have already taken or what are they planning to do. So Catherine, can you kick that off for us, please?
Sure. So I think it's so important, if we're asking employees to take time to take the survey, it's so important to acknowledge them and thank them, report out on the findings, and share what we're going to do about it. We want to take action. So shortly after the survey closed, and our survey was open from May 18th through May 26th, and I really have to acknowledge the County of Monterey's IT department. We partnered up with them, and they were instrumental in developing a countywide Coping with COVID-19 survey website. And on this website, any employee can access it. And we have the various survey topics, we have the questions, the responses, and then we went a step further. We created a taking action section for each of the survey topics. And under taking action, there's a brief recording encouraging employees to do that, take action, and connect with some of the online resources that we have vetted. These could be TED Talk videos, podcasts, articles, websites. And again, they all align with the survey topics. So some are around stress management, some around communication, some around change management. And then what we did is I conducted countywide webinars that are recorded so that anybody can access those recordings if they weren't able to attend live. And we showcased the website. And we talked about the taking action resources. We showcased some of those. And I really sent out the message to the webinar participants that this is a self-directed approach, that they can take responsibility, that they don't have to wait for the department head or manager or supervisor to report out on the survey data, but they can go ahead and support their own success through some of these online resources. In addition, we worked with IT to create a personal website for each of the department heads so that they have their survey results, and they also have their own resource section to help them take action. And we've been conducting other webinars as well on survey related topics. So for example, I'll give you one example around, we have a chief deputy in the public defender's office. She's an attorney. She's trained in mindfulness. So to help our employees manage stress, she's conducted a webinar. We recorded it, and again, anybody can access it. In addition, I've been meeting one-on-one with the department heads to talk about what we can do for them, department specific, and our county administrative officer, again, showing support. I reported to the department heads that he's going to take a progress report on all the action planning from all the departments to the Board of Supervisors. So there's that component of accountability, which I think is really important.
That's great. Again, I really like what you said about accountability and also drilling down, because what we find when we do engagement surveys, and we've done them across the country, we always urge our clients to drill down to the lowest possible work unit, because that's where the action should occur, and it also creates accountability. How about you, Angela?
So we are currently working on revising some policies, namely to have a more permanent remote work outside of COVID, and employees working from home to support their families with distance learning. We're also creating a new revision to our disaster policy. Living in Northern California, we're in the pandemic and fire season. And some questions came up, what does it look like to have to call employees back when they're working remotely, being that we are still disaster service workers? It introduces childcare issues and a lot of other things, including power outages and the public safety power shutoffs. And so what does that mean when you're at home and you're remote working and the power goes out? Do you take personal time? Do you report into work? We have to work those things out. We're also revamping our ergonomic assessment program. During COVID, our occupational health shut down any on-site visits and didn't have a virtual program set up. So we're doing an RFP and looking at a variety of vendors to have more virtual-based needs, so that we can do that for our essential workers and those who are working remote. And then also working through workers' comp issues. What does it mean when there's a claim that's incurred at home? How do we, if we needed to do a visit or take pictures or whatnot, how do you do that when these are issues that just we haven't encountered before? So working with great consultants and learning from other HR professionals and just sharing new ideas.
Thank you. And I think your comments relate to what we found in general about employees understanding COVID-19 policies. There was a substantial percentage of employees who disagreed with the statement, I understand my COVID-19 policies. There, another organization that we're working with posts a set of FAQs about COVID-19, not necessarily the health issues, but their own policies, and they're constantly updating those FAQs because, as you suggest, this is really a rapidly evolving situation. Michelle.
Yes, and these actions are great. I want to just basically piggyback off of what Catherine and Angela had talked about. It's so important to partner. I'm sure that the work many of the organizations have around engagement have a few people. If they do have a few people, they at least have one person working on engagement. So partnering with other departments like IT, partnering with your media services team, if you have one, someone that can help you develop some things to get the word out, or to create some sites or mechanisms to encourage collaboration or to encourage engagement is really helpful. So I'm probably forgetting a bunch of the other people that have helped out during the time we administered the survey and the one that's upcoming, but it is important to partner and to pull people in. One of the things that we did do around results was, like Catherine said, talking to each of the departments. Our engagement team we're like a team of two with a bunch of arms. Our engagement team set up meetings with each of the departments regarding their results. We were grateful to CPS Consulting to be able to provide those specific results for departments with 50 or more responses. So we had individual meetings with those departments and discussed their results, their specific unique feedback, and got them to think through some things that they could do specifically to engage the employees or be responsive to those results. We set up a framework for action planning. So we are Smartsheet users at the City of Detroit. So we created a site where all of the departments could input their actions, their planned actions around the goals that they had to improve results. So we saw the themes around safety, communication, and well-being. And so we encouraged them to, at the very least, make one of your goals to talk about the results with your teams. Other goals would be, what could you do to improve communication? We trended on communication being better between peers than leadership communication to employees. So we asked them, what can you do better? How can you improve the ways that you communicate, how you communicate, the frequency of your communication? So that was one of the things that we did. One of the other things is hearing about well-being and how they're dealing with this. We heard a lot from parents at this time. And so we did partner with another division that works within HR to really create some materials around what are some resources for parents dealing with children. Well, there were closed down daycare centers and things. So we pulled together a lot of resources for that. We have really been increasing the marketing around our EAP services and making sure that we let all of our employees know that they and their families are eligible to participate and to utilize those services. So we've just basically been trying to be as responsive as possible, but to create some accountability around what we heard so that employees would know that we are being responsive and we're hearing what they're telling us.
Michelle, it may be that your word cloud, the most prominent word in your word cloud was good because you're doing all of those things, EAP, and really acknowledging and recognizing that folks are working at home, have to deal with some situations that are unavoidable, and you have to help them be able to deal with those situations. Right. So I'm going to go to the audience now. There are a couple of questions that have come in. I have a couple more that we can ask the panelists, but let's go to your questions. One of them is a technical question about the survey itself. The question is the survey anonymous so employees can be truthful? And yes, the way we designed the survey, we made it available to the organizations that wanted to implement it, and then they administered it through their link. So it was completely anonymous. The only thing that we were able to do was include a list of organizational units, so employees are able to self-identify their organizational units. And as Michelle said, we were then able to report the results by organizational unit. And just like when we do employee engagement surveys, we often, almost always, find a lot of variability, even within the single organization, when we take a look at departments or divisions. So one question which really tracks with what we were going to ask is, what strategies or recommendations do you have to maintain or increase engagement levels for remote workers? This is an issue that at the Institute we have spent a lot of time discussing, but we'd like to hear from our panelists. So I'm going to open it up. What strategies or recommendations do you have to maintain or increase engagement levels for remote workers? Who would like to take that one?
I'm happy. I'm happy to.
Go ahead.
So I'll share with you that, again, partnering with IT, we created a telework website, telework during COVID-19. And again, it has informal learning resources for both leaders and employees. And if you want to take a look at it, it's on the County of Monterey's Human Resources homepage, so it's for the public as well. I partnered with one of my colleagues in HR, and we developed online training. One version, it was telework during COVID-19 for employees, and then another version for managers and supervisors. And in addition, I'm trying to leverage, or I am leveraging, our internal talent. We have wonderful subject matter experts. So I mentioned earlier doing webinars, and I've been doing one once a month. In August, I interviewed our director of IT, and in his past life working in the private sector, he led remote teams located around the world. So that webinar was entitled Managing and Supervising Teleworkers, and we recorded it so our employees can have access to it at any time. So, just trying to engage our leaders, making them more present to our employees. And another thing I'll mention, you may want to borrow, and it comes out of Harvard, it's research. There's a book called The Progress Principle. I've been talking to our department heads about it. It's whether you're engaging remote workers or essential workers, but based on this research, it shows that employees feel fulfilled and engaged and even are more creative when they recognize they're making progress in meaningful work. And there's a Harvard Business Review article, it's on the power of small wins, and it's based on this research. So we've had leaders step up and challenge their employees to think about, where am I winning, and celebrate the wins. And we just leveraged Customer Service Week, which was last week, to bring the wins forward in the departments and countywide.
Great, Catherine, thanks. Angela,
Sure.
Michelle, what are your thoughts?
So our benefits team is also part of our wellness committee, and they've put together some great virtual events focusing on health and wellness, and doing some group activities virtually, which I think has been great. You know, we talk a lot about our remote workers who, you know, are doing distance learning and caring for their families. And I think it's also important to think of the employees who may live alone and are losing, you know, day-to-day contact with people outside of the screen. So starting at noon again today, we have mindfulness in the workplace sessions. They're doing some meditation sessions, some chair yoga, just a great pause in the day. Being new to the agency, I didn't realize the annual turkey trot is such a big event, and we're taking it virtual this year. So I got to make sure I register and represent well for HR. So just getting creative and making sure that we don't lose touch with our coworkers. You know, pre-COVID, we spent more time at work sometimes than at home. That dynamic has changed, and we want to make sure that teams still feel that sense of togetherness and collaboration, even though the formats have changed. So I think our benefits team has been really great and staying ahead of the needs of all of our employees to just still connect on a personal basis.
Thanks, Angela. Michelle, you mentioned engagement in response to the previous question. So what are you doing about maintaining and increasing engagement levels, specifically for remote workers, which is what the question is interested in?
Well, really, it's in similar to what Catherine had mentioned, providing some courses. Our talent development team has created a lot of courses around managing remote workers, as well as hosting live sessions. There's a monthly live session where people can call in and ask questions. So there's a way to remain engaged there. I know that we have set up Slack channels so that we can continue communication. There was a lot of unemployment during this time. And one way that we wanted to help employees impacted with that and provide as much information and resources as possible was to create a way to communicate with them and to answer questions when they couldn't get through to the unemployment insurance agency. So the Slack channel they've been very receptive there. They've gotten a lot of their questions answered and things. So it's really opening up and making yourself available and acknowledging that we're out here remote. There's also the thing that we've read about and I've experienced, Zoom fatigue. So when it comes to being on video all the time, and when I first went out, I was doing we call a huddle every morning at 8:30. Okay, that wore us out. I took us down to Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Now we're Wednesday. But there's still at first there wasn't an option. I was really encouraging people to get on camera. I associated it with being in a meeting with a paper bag over your head, but over time, it just gets worn out and we're always on Zoom meetings. So allowing for that space for people to not be on camera, I think that helps to allow that flexibility, if you will, in letting people not be on camera sometimes if it's just not a camera type of day.
Good, thank you. Great answers. I want to add two comments. First of all, with respect to remote employees, as I mentioned, we at the Engagement Institute, we've done a lot of thinking about this. We actually have written and did a webinar specifically on maintaining engagement during the pandemic. And one of the things we have always found in our employee engagement work is leadership is the number one key driver of engagement. We found it in our national survey. We find it in most of the individual organizations that we work with. So leaders need to continue to be visible, even if it's from their den, to show employees that they are continuing to actively manage the organization and that they're also sensitive in the way that all three of you have discussed to some of the unique challenges that employees face, whether they're working remotely and they have to deal with interruptions and family and pets and lawnmowers and all kinds of things, or they're continuing to come to work and they have to deal with, how do I keep safe and healthy? So leaders have to step up now in a way that maybe they didn't even have to previously. So that's, I think, really critically important. The other point I want to make is, as I mentioned earlier, much of the conversation nationally is about remote workers, right? The tremendous exponential increase in the number of employees who are working remotely, and how do we manage them? How do we communicate with them? But we can't forget, particularly in the public sector, the essential employees. We have to make sure that they also have opportunities to be engaged, and we give them the resources and the tools to be successful and also to be safe. Another question, and this is a good one, this often comes up in our work. Do any of you have challenges with getting buy-in from key leaders related to the value of the survey? And if so, how did you gain buy-in? And I'll throw that open to the panel. Challenges in getting buy-in from key leaders about the survey, the value of the survey, and what'd you do to get buy-in?
I just sent the link out anyway. I had the support of my director, but I think given that we hadn't done a survey in so long, I think there was resistance and a fear of, what are we going to find out? What is this going to unearth? So be it, let's go there. If it's negative feedback, then there's an opportunity to do better. And if there's good feedback, then we're on the right track. But I think it wasn't a time to turn away from what our employees were going through. So I just sent it out anyway.
Good for you.
Bob, I can speak to that.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Again, I want to acknowledge the county's senior leaders. So first of all, my manager, who's the director of HR, is very open to new ideas and change. And so she was very receptive. And then with that, we talked to the CAO, and then I was brought in to present to the department heads. So we checked in with department heads that here's the idea. CPS HR, a vendor that we've worked with, is offering this up, and it's no charge. It's a no-brainer. Let's go for it. And they were receptive, and they're used to the employee engagement process was launched in 2018, and then again in 2019. So this has been their third survey. So they've been used to. They've been getting acclimated to annual surveys. We told them that we didn't want to over-survey, so this was going to be the only survey in 2020. And then I was also asked by our CAO to come to the Board of Supervisors and have a closed session and talk about and present on the survey. So to get that kind of receptivity and support from the top really meant a lot, and to get the buy-in from the get-go meant a lot. And I will share with you too that it helps that with some of the coping with COVID-19 survey results that were in alignment to the county's annual survey in 2019, like around communication, for example, we had some significant increases in scores. So that really helps. It gives leaders that boost and confidence, and we talk about what they did to drive those scores. So it opens up conversation for that as well.
Thanks, Catherine. Michelle, anything to add?
Yeah, I will say that I think something unique about the three of us is that we came into our roles not long before COVID hit. And so we didn't really have this history with the organization. And so it's so important to understand the culture in the organization in getting buy-in. And one thing I believe that worked on our end for the participation that we did get and the buy-in we did get was leveraging influencers from the top. Sometimes these department heads like competition. And so when they feel like they're competing against one another, or they'll shine, and we just got to use those old school ways of getting people involved and interested, make it fun. I know we leveraged influencers. So those who we realized were going to be on board and could also be an advocate for the survey, that's how we encouraged buy-in. Of course, we didn't get everybody there. And after we had some lessons learned, and we found out that there was some misconceptions about the survey. So going forward, we're learning that we have to be very specific with certain leaders about what this means, what confidentiality is, how can we make it more specific to your respondents So that's kind of after the fact, but going in, we really got to leverage those influencers from the top.
Great. When we do a survey, engagement survey or this survey, we really focus on communication, as you've been suggesting, not just from us as a third party, but within the organization, from the leaders, understanding the business case, that this isn't just another HR thing, this is really about organizational performance. And we're also sending a message to employees, we care about how you're feeling. We want to know, and we're going to take action on the results. Make that commitment upfront and in a very visible way. So we have a question about kind of the post-COVID-19 environment. Have any of the presenters been involved in the return to work process yet? And if so, what steps have been taken to help those working remotely return to the workplace? So I'll throw that open. Anyone in that situation right now where you're trying to bring folks back, and how are you doing?
Yeah. We're on the like half, and I won't say half and half, but we've made some of those transitions. And it sort of ties to the question around how aware our employees are of the different COVID policies and things. And so we have a universal workplace safety standards policy around COVID-19. And so there are some specific guidelines that are required for departments in setting up their departments with enough space, enough distancing, enough protection equipment and things. And so all of that is in our safety guidelines. We also have a daily screening that is required in coming in. So we want employees to feel safe in coming back into the workplace. And so if everyone is compliant with responding to the daily screenings, then we know that if they're coming into the workplace, that they are in a safe environment. So those are some of the things that we've been doing. There is a bit of we've initiated a frequency on COVID testing. So every 8 weeks or so, we like to cycle some employees into the testing environment just so that they're feeling safe in their environment. So those are some of the steps that we've taken.
Great, Michelle. Angela or Catherine, anything?
Sure. Go ahead, Catherine.
Yeah.
I was going to say, just to piggyback on what Michelle said in terms of helping employees feel safe, I'll go back to our IT department. HR and IT partnered, and IT created a self-screening app. So employees download this on their phone or their computer, and prior to coming in, there's questions that they answer, and then the response will either tell them that they're clear or they're not clear. If they're not clear, they call their supervisor, and the supervisor or manager automatically gets the results for each of their employees. We also have temperature checks at the facilities, signage, and we have safety reps and worksite plans so that each department is mandated to turn in a worksite plan. So I think it's important when we're thinking about bringing employees back, we're thinking about the emotional intelligence, the emotional component. If people are feeling safe or safer at home and now they're being asked to come back into the workplace, what emotions are running? Perhaps disruptive emotions. So how do we show them? I even tell leaders, you may have set up all these safety protocols and they may have been in place for months, but when people are stressed, they're looking at the glass half empty, not half full at times, and they're forgetting, they're kind of desensitized to what you've done for them. So keep communicating that and keep reminding them of that and keep reassuring them that the safety and the well-being are at the forefront. And crisis management experts will state and recommend that leaders, as you mentioned earlier, Bob, have a presence, that they're seen and they're heard, and that they're using words to reassure and even set a tone of psychological safety with employees.
Great. Angela?
Just to add a bit, we had our protocols and things that were written down on what a return to work looks like. I think our agency was one of the first. I've been back since May 18th. I think I'm the only one back in my office today. But we realized partly from the survey too of needing a variety of communication approaches. And so we're very fortunate to have a media services team. And one of my analysts has a background in musical theater. And so we wrote a script basically to showcase things like our wellness station. We didn't do mandatory screenings to enter the buildings, but each floor, each wing has a wellness station. It's got a QR code. You can scan it from your phone and the video pulls right up. Talks about glove removal, when to wear them, proper use of PPE, masks. We were able to give each employee 2 face masks with our logo on it, and PD and Fire got their unique shields. And so we've also found that we're sending that video out we sent it to everyone as they returned. We're also included in our onboarding so that new employees are being brought into the organization. Yes, we're still hiring, learning about the COVID protocols from day one. And then I just had a meeting with a couple employees at Parks and Rec who had some concerns, and we had kind of the vague doctor's note saying, this employee has a concern, make sure you're following CDC guidelines. So that's not a note placing them off work. It's kind of more cluing in that maybe there's some hesitancy in coming back and not knowing what protocols are in place. And so we have the managers and supervisors, sometimes with HR support, we just have a phone call or Zoom meeting and we walk them through, here's what's going on in your specific department, in the agency as a whole. Here's a video that all employees are watching, after seeing this and hearing about the protocols, what concerns might you still have and how can we address that? In some cases, we're having the employees do a trial run. They just come back for half a day and they could see it for themselves, discuss any concerns that still exist. And in most cases, they've seen it, they felt comfortable to return. So it's not just saying, okay, your calendar day's up, report back to work. But like you said, Catherine, is thinking of that emotional component and just reassuring them. And then also hearing if there's something that we haven't addressed and they speak to it, then we act upon it and make it better, make it right.
Thanks very much. We are at the top of the hour, so we're going to have to stop. If any of you have additional questions, though, enter them in the chat box and we will respond to them offline. I want to thank our panelists, Michelle, Angela, and Catherine. Great stuff. I know that your organizations are great places to work based on what you said today. So thank you very much for participating. Also want to mention that everyone who logged in today will receive links to the report, to the presentation I gave, and to a recording of the webinar. So look out for that in your email. Jerry, you want to say anything to wrap up?
Yeah, just a little bit. I think that one of the things that came out of all of this, I see as a benefit, is that the level of engagement and communication across organizations has increased exponentially. And in an office, you may have a bi-weekly staff meeting, you may have something where you see them occasionally, but you're not necessarily talking to them like you're engaging with them now. So one of the benefits out of this is that you have to engage with them, you have to talk to them to know how they're doing, how the work's getting done. And so hopefully we won't revert back to the way we were before, when a body in a seat meant that they were there and we were assuming that they were being productive. So the outgrowth of this is we've seen that increased communication really helps the employee and put the employee in a better place in terms of how they work and such. And so based on that, I think it's important that we continue this as we go forward and not lose sight of the fact that once the pandemic is over, if it's ever going to be over, that we can revert back to past practices, because this is obviously working for us right now.
And from the standpoint of an employee of CPS HR, I can say that Jerry is walking that walk.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all very much. Jason, are we done? Jason's muted.
I'm on mute. One of those faux pas of virtual conferences. Thank you again, everybody. I'm going to get this recording done, and hopefully we'll have it over to everyone by the end of the day or tomorrow morning.
Thanks again to the panelists. Great job.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.